I didn't go through this experience of, challenging my thoughts about gender equality and, what it means to be a feminist as a man, I don't know if I chose to take this paternity leave. I'm not saying like, hey, like everyone should do this, or everyone should change their name. Every man should change their name, or every man should take their paternity leave. Even though the paternity leave part, I highly recommend it. But it's something that I didn't think I was going to do growing up. But after having this experience, I'm so glad that I chose to do these things, and just kind of wanted to share this message with men who might be struggling with the gender expectations in their culture. It's okay to let those go.
Welcome to And Then Everything Changed, a podcast about the pivotal moments in life and decisions that define us. I'm your host, Ronit Plank. Today I'm speaking with Shu Matsuo Post, a gender equality advocate and author of I Took Her Name. Welcome, Shu.
Thank you, Ronit. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. Yeah, and so we're talking, I'm in Seattle and you're in Japan, right?
Yeah, I'm back in Tokyo now.
Okay, and are you from Tokyo?
Near Tokyo originally, but I've been living in Tokyo for the past couple of years now.
Okay, and did you always know that you wanted to stay there, or did you have a time when you thought, I need to get out of this place, I don't want to live in this city anymore?
Well, I grew up here in Japan until the age of 15, and I actually moved to the US and for high school and college, and ended up being there for about 8 years. So
wow.
I definitely had this itch to get out of Japan, to experience the world. And so I went to the US, and I did come back after staying in the US for about 8 years to Japan. And I was here for about 2.5 years, and I got the itch again. I wanted to get out of Japan. And that time I went to Hong Kong, and I was there for about 5 years. And then I came back to Japan again about 3 years ago.
Oh, okay. And so you have had the luxury or the interesting experience of growing up in, I feel like Japan is a pretty masculine society. Am I right about that?
Yeah, masculine as in like patriarchy.
Yes, patriarchal society.
Yeah, patriarchal. Yeah.
And so, I want to really talk a little bit before we talk about how you transformed and your work now. I think it's really fun to kind of dive in a little bit and see what contrast or similarities you found between the US, or where you were living in the US, and your upbringing in Japan. Because I've never been to Japan. I do hope to go sometime when COVID is finished. And I only know what I see in media. So what was your personal experience patriarchally in Japan?
Japan is a very homogenous country, meaning, if you're Japanese, and most people are Japanese, especially from where I'm from, pretty much everyone looked the same, everyone thought the same, and everyone believed in same things. So, as a majority, I didn't know diversity or other points of view. And when I went to the US, I was a minority by race, ethnicity, and by nationality. So that was the first time I was like, wow, there are lots of different kinds of people, which is awesome. And I also definitely felt the difference between Japan and the US in terms of the society, like masculinity, what it means to be masculine. And I think in the US or American influenced cultures, hyper masculinity is like so emphasized, meaning, you gotta be so macho, like physically too, very strong, athletic, kind of show dominance, aggression, and that's a positive thing, like being that way all the time, like not showing emotions. And I think those qualities tend to be thought as masculine in American culture. And I do agree, like those are individually really good qualities. But if you're rejecting, outside of that, like traditional feminine qualities, such as like being empathetic, showing, expressing emotions more freely, I think that can be toxic as well.
And so when you were in the U.S., and can you remind me where you spent the bulk of your time, what city or state you were in?
California for 8 years.
When you first got there, I mean, how did that contrast to the kind of masculinity and the messages you got growing up when you were younger in Japan?
Yeah. And in Japan is a collective culture, and conformity is so important as opposed to individuality. So I was naturally a little bit shy compared to most American children. So I was kind of taken aback when I first started to go to school in the US. Everyone's like raising their hands and like expressing themselves. And I was like, wow, like I'm not used to this. And I think a lot of people thought I was shy and, kind of, they didn't understand me because I wasn't used to expressing myself that vocally. So, and also like, I think American culture tends to see Asian men as more feminine, partially because of that, personality of kind of being shy or not aggressive. So I definitely felt that. But in Japan, that was the norm, and I fit in as a kind of I didn't feel like I was quiet in Japan, but I definitely did felt that way in the US.
Well, it's interesting too, because it makes me wonder, I mean, I almost feel silly asking this, but is there a version of toxic masculinity in Japan from what you can see?
Absolutely. So it looks different, but it's very male dominated culture still, like at work settings as well. Like the language that men speak is often different from what the women speak. And then there's like an expectations. So men speak in more like a dominant way in Japanese, and to show power over their subordinates, obviously, but also often with women, and that in the workplace and also like casual settings as well. So the patriarchy, the power dynamic shows up in that way. And
so you're saying it's ingrained in the language and the style of communication?
Yes. Yeah. But if you're, just looking at the physical attributes, oftentimes Asian men aren't as physically like buff or muscular. A lot of us tend to be more slim. If you look at the Korean pop band BTS, they're like super popular, and it's cool that they're getting recognized as an Asian boy band. But they look very different, more on the feminine side, like slim compared to most American or Western boy bands. So that's pretty stereotypical, but I'd say it's a lot of Asian men physically seem that way as well.
So then, knowing where we're going to go in the story and in your story, and I'm sure some listeners can already assume where I'm going with this, but did you have any messages that you feel were particular to your family in terms of femininity and masculinity or the patriarchy? Or do you feel like your family pretty much was right there where everybody else was where you were growing up?
My parents have been very open minded. They had my dad worked for an American company, so he was always interested in like international affairs and all that stuff. So they didn't try to force me to believe in a certain way, but it was more about the media, society, my friends, and what I learned in school. And through those messages, subtle messages, I kind of created this image of men, like what manhood was supposed to be. So, get a good job, do well in school, get a good job, and work for that company for a very long time, have a family, work harder to protect you, provide for your family, and retire and enjoy your life kind of thing. So, naturally, no one really told me directly, like that's how I was supposed to live, but I kind of created that through all the messages from my upbringing. And I think it's a pretty typically Asian,
yeah. And was emotion, like what was the feeling you had about when you experienced strong feelings? Did you feel free to express them?
Yeah, and fortunately, or I guess unfortunately, I did pretty well in school
Mm-hmm.
in Japan. So it wasn't like a problem for me. I was like, okay, I could do this. I could live this way. I'm getting good grades. I feel like I could go to a good school. But when I came to the U.S., it wasn't the case. I struggled in school because I had to
Mm-hmm.
learn everything in a new language. So that was very difficult. But at the time, I felt like living the script per se
Mm-hmm.
was appropriate for me, and I didn't have any issues thinking that way. Like, okay, my life should be this way, and this is what
Mm-hmm.
success looks like as a man for me.
Mm-hmm. Right. And did you know what you wanted to be?
I actually wanted to be an athlete. I wanted to be a professional golfer
Mm.
growing up, and that didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, being an athlete was is also respected in the Japanese culture as well,
Mm-hmm.
professional athletes, and especially as a man. And I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to become one. And once I, kind of gave up that dream, I was pretty heartbroken. I still
Mm.
remember that day. I was like, I didn't make the tryout for my college team, and I knew if I didn't make it, I wouldn't be able to be a professional golfer.
Mm.
So um, I went through a period of really rough time. I didn't know what I wanted to be after that. That was part of my kind of identity crisis. Like, okay, I can't be the person, the man that I thought I was going to be. Now what? Like,
Mm. Mm.
so it took me a while to find that, what I wanted to be. But after that, I really didn't know what I wanted to be. At the time in college, I was studying journalism. So naturally, I pursued journalism, which I
Mm-hmm.
really enjoyed. But it's a very tough job to make a living out of. Um, but I just focused on experiences,
Mm.
experiencing life, and kind of rode the wave, and ended up being in New York after graduation, and then came back to Tokyo, and went to Hong Kong. And in hindsight, I'm glad that I did what I did. But yeah, I had no idea what I wanted to do.
So, can you talk about how you met your wife?
Yes, so it was in Hong Kong. It was about, I think it was 2014. It was my third year in Hong Kong. At the time, I was obviously single, and I was meeting people, and I was dating as a single man. And we actually met on a dating app, actually. And didn't think I was going to meet a future wife that way, but we did.
It's too late now.
It's too late now. Yeah. At the time, we were like, oh man, we're too embarrassed to kind of talk about that. But hey, it's like it's
I think
becoming
it's
a
more
norm. So
common. I think it's
yeah,
more common than you
yeah,
think, actually.
yeah. We have nothing to hide now. It's not like I was looking for a soulmate or a life partner at the time. I just wanted to meet people. And I remember when I met her, she was very nice, kind, and we like hit it off. But I knew she was different in a way. She's a teacher, and she teaches English to international students wherever she lived. and
Mm-hmm.
and at the time she was teaching at an international school in Hong Kong. And I remember one of the earlier dates, she told me about the new unit she was teaching, which was gender and language.
Mm-hmm.
And she was kind of asking me about questions on my view on gender equality. And she asked me questions about what I did, my my take on dating, and how a man was supposed to behave in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So, to give you an example, on this date, I took her out to dinner. I think it was her birthday, and I wanted to kind of treat her right on
Mm-hmm.
that first birthday celebration together as a couple. And we went to this really fancy restaurant in the heart of Hong Kong. And as soon as we entered the restaurant, I kind of sat her down, like I pulled a chair, trying to be chivalrous. you know, and trying to impress her with like ordering like really expensive things on the menu, kind of like trying to be a gentleman. And I thought that's what I was supposed to do because, you know, I read all these dating books and, you know, men are supposed to do this way, especially early on in dates, and make sure you pay for dates and everything. So, and I was like, okay, I'm just following the manual. I'm doing the right things, right? And I remember she asked me those questions about why I do those things. Like, hey, why are you doing these things? It wasn't like she was trying to attack me. She was just genuinely curious. And I didn't know what to say because that's what I learned. And I thought that's what I was supposed to do to be successful in dating. And that's when I realized I really need to think about why I'm doing these things. Because, you know, being chivalrous, I wrote this in my book as well, it's a very nice gesture to the person you're being nice to. But if you're only doing it to women or one, you know, one gender, that can't be sexist. You know, if you're just being nice to try to get attention of the women you're attracted to, or just women, it can be sexist. You know, there are many, if you're a man, you know, there are many men that you can be nice to, you should be nice to as well, who are in need. And, you know, if you're rejecting the idea of being nice to those men only because they're men, you know, that's not a kind gesture. So that's something I realized then. And we started talking about the topic of gender equality and feminism. And at the time, I had no idea what feminism really meant. And
yeah, I was going to ask you that actually. Had you heard of it, or did you have any associations with it?
Yeah, I had definitely heard of it. And my association was that feminism was for like lesbians and angry women who hate men. And I was kind of against
you about covered it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't know gender equality and feminism are the same thing. You know, if you're promoting for gender equality, you're a feminist, as Emma Watson said in the famous He for She speech. And that was the time when she gave that speech. So that was kind of my aha moment. If this what feminism actually means, I am a feminist. And yeah, that's when I started to learn more about it. I guess that's when I started my journey into feminism.
And so did your wife at the time see that you were genuinely interested? Like, did you feel inside that you were interested in the subject, not just because she was, or, you know, where was your interest level?
I was very interested because she challenged me in a way that came from out of a curiosity, not out of hey, I'm right, you're wrong, you know. So I didn't feel that I was being defensive after kind of talking about it with her. So that's something that I really appreciate that she did.
For me, sometimes when I'm interested in something and I begin my journey into understanding it, I do it because I'm genuinely interested or someone mentioned it to me. And so it sounds like for you, I mean, you had an interest in it, and also this person you were genuinely interested in being with and wanting to be with was, you know, showing you sort of this pathway. And so at some point, though, it became your pathway unto yourself. Yeah. Like it became the thing that you knew made sense to you.
Yeah. And I was definitely curious about the topic because I associated myself as someone who believed in gender equality, but I didn't call myself a feminist. So I wanted to connect the dots, you know, because I learned that being a feminist means promoting for gender equality. So if I believed in gender equality, like I should be a feminist. So what can I do? And all I needed was more education. And so that's what I did. I started to learn more about it. I started to talk to my girlfriend at the time, now wife, more about it. And I started to read more about feminism.
And so how was the reaction in your family? Did you start to talk with them about it? Did you start to talk with your other friends about it? What were your peers' reaction?
I didn't really share about that until she and I got engaged. And, you know, that's that's when we started to talk about our last names, right? So we got engaged, and we naturally started to discuss what we wanted to do with our last name. And she told me that she really liked her last name, so she wasn't going to just take my last name. And I was okay with it. So my name was just Matsuo, and her name was Post. And we thought about, okay, should we just have separate names after we get married? But we wanted to have kids, and we wanted our kids to have the same last name as well. So we chose to combine our last names. So that's why it's now Matsuo Post. And I told my parents about that, like, hey, I'm going to combine names with Tina. And then they were very understanding. And her parents
I was just going to ask about her parents. Yeah. Were they surprised at all?
No, actually. They were very supportive. And, I think they were happy to keep the Post legacy as well.
So what made you realize, like, what made you decide to write the book? And let's talk a little bit about what's in the book and what you are hoping readers will take away.
Yes. So the aha moment, or the exact moment why I chose to decided to write a book, is when I went through this name changing process. So we were in Hong Kong when we were getting married, and we actually got married in the US. And all we had to do was went to the city hall the day after our wedding, and we signed the paperwork and submitted it, and our name was officially changed. It was as easy as that. And after the honeymoon, we were actually moving to Japan. So for me, moving back to Japan, and for her, it was her first time living in Japan. And I wanted to do the same thing in my home country. So I went to the city hall and tried to submit paperwork, and like, hey, here's my new name. I just got married to a foreign national. So we changed our name to Matsuo Post. And they were like, no, you can't do that. In Japan, you can't combine last names with your spouse, or you can't have separate last names.
It's not an option.
It's not an option. So it's a huge, huge controversy right now.
I didn't know
in Japan.
that.
It's still going.
So there's enough interest and enough couples who would like to either keep their own names or kind of merge.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Do you know why the government is resisting it?
Because change takes a lot of effort and also money. I think that's one of the biggest reasons. And, it's been a tradition. In Japan, a lot of people say, like, well, it's always been that way. Japan has a rich history. Why are we changing it so that we're, I don't know, accepting more like a Western ideology or whatever? Very traditional way of thinking. So that's what the conservatives are saying. But a lot of young people are choosing not to get married because they want to keep their identity. They don't want to change their last names, which I totally understand. Yeah.
That's interesting. That might kind of create enough pressure to make a change happen.
Yeah, especially
it seems like if the government is so traditional, that you would imagine they'd want to preserve marriage. Absolutely.
Especially with the decreasing population in Japan, one of the bigger topics in Japan.
I think I heard something about that, but not lately. I don't know what the figures are or how concerned everyone is, or if the numbers continue to decline now.
Yeah, and obviously you can choose to have children without being married, but a lot of people are hesitant. A lot of the couples are hesitant to even get married and have kids because of this like name changing thing. So yeah, it's an interesting topic.
Yeah. So you go to where we are now then, is that you're getting some pushback and they don't want you to be able to take the name in Japan.
Yeah. So yes, because of this law, naturally, I believe 96% of the time it's the wife who ends up taking the husband's name. So I was one of few men who were going through this name changing process. And then the city hall was like, hey, you have to go to the family court to plead your case. You can't just accept your request. So I was like, okay, well, I'll do whatever it takes because I really want to change my name. And I went to the family court thinking, we just got married and family courts are for people that are getting divorced and all
Mm.
that stuff. But anyway, the person at the family court told me that since my wife is a foreign national who had changed her name in her home country already, I could technically just take her name, so that we're following the Japanese law and making our wish come true. So that's what I did. So that's why the book is called I Took Her Name, even though we technically combined our names.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what prompted you to write the book?
Yeah. So when I went through that process, so it took me about 8 months to officially change my name, mostly because I was working full time and I couldn't find the time to like go to city hall and family courts back and forth. But that really got me thinking, like, wow, changing your name is a lot of work. After that, I had to, I changed my passport, credit cards, like everything, like all the IDs and all that stuff. And obviously, so many women have done this in the past, and they probably had never talked about it, or they did, but it didn't really get to men, so men never talked about it because it wasn't their issue, right? So I was like,
right, exactly.
Yeah, this is like really time consuming. This is not fun. And that really hit me. Like, it's wrong to expect just one gender to go through this only because they're women. It should be a choice-based decision. So, and if I just felt that was very sexist, for not just Japan, but I think all over the world, it's more common for the wife to take the husband's name. And I just didn't feel that it was right. So, if there is sexism in like a once in a lifetime activity like changing your name, what else is there in our everyday life? And that's when I really started to dig into my research about gender equality. And I found like lots of things in Japan and also like other cultures as well.
What are some of the more notable ones that stand out to you even now?
I think the language is a big piece. So especially in Japanese, I give you an example. There are many pronouns to describe I for men in Japan, in Japanese, but there's really like only one for women. And men have the options to change the pronoun based on who they're speaking to. So if I'm speaking to like someone that's older or superior, I would say watashi, which is very neutral. And that's actually the most gender neutral pronoun. And that's the only option for women to say I as well. But if you're talking to someone that's your subordinates or your peers or often like family members, men can say ore or boku, which actually shows like power and aggression. Not aggression, but power. Meaning like, hey, I have power.
Like the status.
Status,
it's higher status.
Yeah, so you would never say ore as I to someone who has more power or authority than you. That's considered extremely rude because it basically means like I have more power than you, or, I have equal power than you kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's my interpretation of it. And I didn't realize it until I looked into it. Like, I never say ore to someone that's older or someone that's has more authority than me. And and
it's interesting too. I wonder, I don't know, it's because in English, and I I might be incorrect, but in English, I know a little bit of Hebrew, and of course I studied French in high school. But this whole idea of feminine and masculine pronouns, aside from he and she, doesn't really exist. The depth of that difference is not as obvious in English. And so I wonder sometimes as language progresses and culture progresses in different countries, if at any time some of these gender-specific nouns and gender-specific descriptions and conjugations will ever seem obsolete, or if they will ever go away. Because the very fact that we're gendering them speaks to the structure in a place.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And also there's an interesting, if I can give you another language example. So there is a few words to describe husband and wife in Japanese. And one of the common ones is to say shujin, to call your husband shujin, which literally means master of the house, like a master person. And you can only use that word to refer your husband, which implies that only men can be the master of the household, not women. So I noticed that some women use that to refer their husbands, and I was like, wow, like, and I've never heard of any men use that for their wives, right? So I thought that's sexist as well, and I don't like that word anymore. And there's a funny story. My wife, who doesn't speak Japanese, went to a hospital to get like a pre-visit for her minor surgery, and she went alone, and it was like a rural area outside of Tokyo, so none of the nurses spoke English, so they were trying to communicate with smartphones. And the nurses wanted to know, female nurses wanted to know that if I was coming to the actual surgery date. And so they typed in, is your master coming, to your surgery next week in Japanese. And she knew what that meant because we had been talking about it. And so she said, like, yes, well, my husband is coming. But in her mind, she was like, well, I'm the master of my own life,
Yeah.
No one's my master.
Yeah, well, so then what do you say nowadays? I mean, do you have a replacement word? Is there another word for it?
Yeah, I started to use the word partner, and you can just say partner in Japanese too.
Is that getting more common? Because I know it's more common here now.
Yeah, no, it's not very common in Japan, but I kind of started it, and people were like, "Are you married?" Or are you married to a woman, or are you with someone?
Yes.
It doesn't show who you're with.
Yes, exactly.
It's not, if you think about it, you don't have to disclose that information if you don't want to.
That's true.
Yeah, but yeah, that I feel good about using that word, and I try to use that word to refer to my wife as much as possible in Japan.
So does she find, I'm curious, if she has found Japan to be vastly different from, when she lives in Tokyo now, but what is the structure like for her and for you compared to Hong Kong? Like, do you feel it's more progressive where you live now or less progressive? Is it the same?
I think Hong Kong had definitely more diversity. And because people from all over the world were there, and which we really enjoyed. Tokyo is there are a lot of foreigners here too, but it's not as much as Hong Kong. So I would say Hong Kong is more progressive in terms of like the diverse culture, and everyone speaks English as well.
And in terms of masculinity, do you see in terms of the patriarchy and that kind of setup there?
That is a good question. I would say yes, just by looking at the gender index ranking. Japan is actually one of the lowest countries on that ranking with the gender gap index ranking.
So now that you're back in Tokyo, I'm curious how your friends and relatives in your neighborhoods growing up, or the people that you talk with now, how do they react to your name, your last name, and the fact that you wrote this book? And is it available in Japanese, or is it right now in print only in English?
Right now it's only available in English, but I'm working towards getting this translated. I'm working with some people to get this translated because those bilingual readers read it, and then they're like, you need to publish this in Japanese. Like more Japanese, especially men, need to read your book. So that's something I'm working on. And the reaction from my family and people in my life. Like I said earlier, my family has been super understanding. So I'm very open about my message in my book with my family too. And I think that opens their eyes as well, which is awesome to see. And I guess my friends, my closest friends are very supportive. They know all the way, like my entire journey, and I'm still going through this journey myself. I guess my transformation, and then they have been very supportive. And some friends ask me like, "Why are you doing this? Like, what does this mean?" And but it's okay. I think I'm showing my authentic self with my friends, and if they like it, they continue to stay as my friends, and if not, probably not, and which is okay.
Did you find any part of yourself pushing back on any feminism that you learned? Was there anything that is still hard for you to wrap your head around or kind of bend a little bit and be flexible about? Because I'm asking because you sound really flexible and you sound open-minded and you sound very much like you're all in. And I'm wondering if you ever hit any walls as you were going through this learning process. And you're saying you're still working on it and it's like a work in progress, but did you have your own biases or kind of stereotypes that you still kind of bump up against?
Yes, I do. So as a new father, I'm on my paternity leave right now. So I get to stay home, take care of our newborn son, and support my wife because she's on her maternity leave as well. And, the feminist part of me is like, hey, I can do as good of a job as a father to take care of our child. But the reality is, my son, even though we try to spend as much time together, I think he prefers his mom. He gets calmer when he's crying with his mom. Like last night, I was holding him when he was crying. He was like, crying hysterically, and I was trying to calm him down. I did everything I knew all the tricks, and it didn't work. And my wife came like, here, let me see. And then he just immediately calmed down. And at the time I was like, wow, I don't want to believe mothers are better at, child caring. And that was kind of like my ego. Obviously, she has she is the source of his only food source right now. And, he did come out of her. So biologically, he probably feels that way. But so what I try to tell myself is like, hey, every child needs a good father, and maybe it's not trying to calm him down when he needs milk or when he actually needs his mom, but there are other things that I can really focus on, like playing with him and actually supporting my wife, like doing the cooking and like the dishes and all the housework stuff. So that's indirect, but I'm still supporting the childcare of my son. So I guess that was my ego, trying to be as good of a parent or as needed,
Well, it's a crisis a lot of the times for new parents anyway. It's I'm many years out of the new parenthood, and I'm sure other people have told you this, and I know you're not asking to hear it, but I have a son and a daughter, and I find that that there's this real special thing that's been happening between my husband and my son where, now that my son is getting to be a little older, 13, he's seeking my husband out a lot more. There's a way that they can relate that's more comfortable for him now that he's becoming a teenager. And I think those things are really cyclical. Moms are always so primary, but there are so many kids out there who just worship their fathers, so just hang tight. It'll come back around.
That's great to hear.
No, I promise. You're going to be like, light up his eyes every time he sees you at some point, In the final moments that we have, is there any aspect of the book I haven't asked you about that you want to hit on?
I guess the main message from my book is, so I wrote this book for men, because, why feminism? Like, you're a man, why are you talking about feminism? I get this question a lot.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think, especially men, think that feminism is for women, women's
Mm-hmm.
empowerment, and it is, but it also helps men achieve freedom, and that's what um, I went through. I'm still going through. I felt this immense feeling of freedom once I kind of let go of the expectations that I thought I had to live up to as a man.
Mm-hmm.
Like the prime example is taking paternity leave. I didn't know anybody around me who took paternity leave when they had their children, but I wanted to. My wife and I had been talking about taking time off when we have had our first child, and I was scared about what my employer was going to think about me, or what people around me were going to think about me taking time off of work, because
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes, and I did this too, and I still do, associate tie my identity to my professional career, and I think a lot of men do that, but I kind of wanted to take this time off to reprioritize what's important in my life. Work is
Mm-hmm.
definitely important, but family is like really, really important for me. And I'm really glad that I did this. And if I didn't go through this experience of, challenging my thoughts about gender equality and, what it means to be a feminist as a man, I don't know if I chose to take this paternity leave. I'm not saying like, hey, like everyone should do this, or everyone should change their name. Every man should change their name, or every man should take their paternity leave. Even though the paternity leave part, I highly recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that I didn't think I was going to do growing up. Um, but after having this experience, I'm so glad that I chose to do these things, and
Mm-hmm.
just kind of wanted to share this message with men who might be struggling with the gender expectations in their culture. It's okay to let those go and,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, live your
I
life.
also think, when you were talking about this idea of work being important, but family is just as important, if not more important. And I think I'm thinking a lot about how many people I've talked to through the podcast, how many writers I know, and really just how many friends I have who've talked about their families of origin and how difficult things might have been, or how emotions and feelings weren't addressed, or how complicated the communication was between their parents or even their fathers or their moms. And so I wonder, it would be such a wonderful offshoot for this embracing of feminism and your ability to stay home and to work and to be equal with your wife, that your son and other people's children know their fathers more, that the family can be stronger, and that the people who come up in the next generation can be wholer and feel more balanced and have less to confront in terms of their own relationships and struggles. Because so many people I know have had a real difficult time in intimate relationships because of what they saw growing up. And I wonder if this is a step in the right direction to help children grow in a more balanced way.
Oh, I couldn't say it better myself. I completely agree, and I hope
Yeah.
that's my hope as well
Mm-hmm.
for my son and for the future generations.
Yeah. Yeah. So Shu, where can people best connect with you?
I have a website. It's pretty simple. It's my name, so shumatsuopost.com. So it's bilingual. So that's for actually Japanese, and for English, shumatsuopost.com/en slash.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find out more about me, what I've done in this field of work, and you can find out more about my book. And I'm also pretty active on Instagram, which is at Shu Matsuo Post.
Great. And I thought about this. I don't know if you've already thought about this, but do you ever think about doing workshops in your town? Like masculinity debunking workshops or feminism workshops. For people, even on Zoom, so people can understand the thinking behind the book and how simple these adjustments can be.
I have. So what I'm focusing on right now and are doing this for students. So I've actually, I got the opportunities to speak to elementary school, high school, and university students in Japan in the past couple months. And it was, I super enjoyed it. And that's the type of work that I want to continue doing, because I believe that education is so important. And, you know, gender education should start as early as possible. So, and so students, and also, yeah, I definitely want to start doing workshops, especially for those decision makers in organizations. I feel like they have so much power to change the future of their company and also the culture that they're creating within their country as well, right? So right now, if you look at just the representation of gender at the top leadership positions, as you know, most of them are men, right? So, you know, they might want to do diverse initiatives or, you know, promote gender equality, but it's very hard to do that if you don't have the female representation at the, you know, at those leadership roles. And this goes for, you know, other intersectionalities as well. So racial.
Yeah. And when you think too about, you know, like even that the powerful message of let's give all fathers paternity leave who want it, that this is a bona fide amount of time. That message alone, it seems so simple in some ways, but that message alone, if companies aren't already doing it, values the father's input and how important it is to weigh equally the needs of a child and a family cycle, a family life for a company, and vice versa, you know? So that kind of a change does make a really big impact. Absolutely.
And I want to use the privileged aspects of my identity to speak to these men about this you know, these topics. So yeah, that's the type of work that I want to continue doing. And yeah, if anyone is interested in learning more about that or working with me, please visit my website, and there's an email there as well. So
great. Well, thank you so much. I'm really glad we had this chance to talk. And I just love the fact that I can connect with you. You're all the way over there in Japan right now. For me, it's so far away. And we were able to have this conversation. Just best wishes to you and your family. And I'm so glad that you're on this mission.
Ronit, thank you so much for having me on your podcast today.
Thank you for listening to And Then Everything Changed. For more on this episode, photos, and other episodes you might like, please visit atecpodcast.com. You can connect with me and learn more about episodes on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram also. Just search for my name, Ronit Plank, RONITPLANK, and you will find all the updates. If you like this podcast, please remember to subscribe and also rate and review so other people can find it. Thank you so much for listening.